Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to view The Furies from 2019. So, this movie was really interesting compared to like the normal, like traditional slasher, where it's like you get one slasher and he's going after a number of people. Instead, we have a number of slashers that are going after a number of women, and I was like, okay, that seems rather intriguing. So this movie is an hour and 22 minutes, so it doesn't get into much like detail and it doesn't go into many of the backstory, even though there's a whole bunch of characters and there's a whole bunch of things that you probably should want to know more about, but you don't get the time to. And so we have the focus being on two characters in the beginning of this film who are both Kayla and Maddie, and then they end up getting taken and put into this game, which they end up all awakening in this coffin-like box, and they then get out of the box to then realize that they are going to have to run for their lives and have all of these killers start to come after them. We start to see the further and further this game plays out that it seems that somehow the killers are connected to certain women that are to get killed off in this film. And I was like, okay, that seems rather interesting. To where it seems that the game is to kind of change to where not only do the women need to go on and defend themselves against killers, but then also women are to start to defend themselves against other women. And so that becomes just rather interesting. And so, with that said, I would go on and say that this movie is a decent film. It doesn't look like poor quality, or it has like a good enough story for the time allotted. And so yeah, I would definitely give this a thumbs up. It's to of course be okay, or a solid okay film. And so yeah, so with that said, this movie also goes on to remind me of the Predator movie. If you guys were ever to see like the Topher Grace Predator film, where we have a bunch of people like being parachuted in and they drop onto this planet and they have to go on and fight off all the predators. Like, that's what this movie to me reminds me of. I think a lot of people immediately throw out words like Hunger Games and stuff like that. We also have our characters that are to go on and have this barrier that they cannot get further past because they'll get electrified. And so that also could really remind you of like Hunger Games, where in the Hunger Games they had like this dome thing, this wall, and so yeah, like other than that, it also kind of reminds me of the Rob Zombie movie 31. It's a very dark and gritty film, but still like it can go on and remind people of that. Or possibly the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Running Man. Just throwing that out there. Throwing it out there of that movie. So, with that said, let's go on and let's double fire this bad boy up, because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, these two killers in the very beginning of this film don't have a name, it seems. Because I was to look up all the killers and to need to look them up by like photos, because I couldn't have figured out which way to like have the names of these characters. So I, of course, was to go on and realize that the first two killers don't have names. So, with that said, we go on into the very beginning of this, and we have a character who is wielding a scythe. So I'm just going to call him Scythe. He has this kind of deformed baby face like mask, and I can't go on and justify calling him Babyface because there's another character called Babyface in this film. So that goes on and rules that out. So we have a character that I'm just calling Scythe, who is running behind a woman named Jess in this forest. And all of a sudden, Jess is to go on and trip and is to fall and break her leg. So we all of a sudden have Scythe who's like, all right, like, I'm going to go on and I'm going to kill this woman. None of the slasher guys say a word to anybody, but I'm just kind of methodically thinking of the next steps of this character. So we have Scythe that is thinking, I'm going to get me some of that Jess. And we then all of a sudden have a man that comes in with this plastic mask that I'm just going to go on and call him Slick, because it looks like the mask is to have this kind of like slicked back hair, kind of like the kind of old Barbie or Ken or Ken dolls. Yeah, it looks like that. The mask looks like a Ken doll. So I'm going to call him Slick because why not? So we have Slick who is fighting with Scythe, as Jess is now like kind of on her own, just kind of holding on to her leg, knowing that she's going to die soon. So we have Slick that goes on to stab into Scythe with his own weapon, and then Slick is to go on and take Jess and is to kind of pick her up and walk away with her. And that's, I guess, how this first game ends. So having her eventually get set up for the next round, or the next time that she's to go on and fight. So we then transition from that. So we have two girls named Kayla and Maddie. They are going on and graffitiing some wall out in town somewhere. So we have Maddie that goes on to spray paint these words called F patriarchy. And so we have Maddie that's like, okay, well, I spray painted. Now, Kayla, you go on and you spray paint. And so Kayla's like, well, hey, you spelled patriarchy wrong. She's like, what? And so she's like, oh, you're giving me crap. So Maddie goes on and spray paints Kayla's shirt because she's annoyed with her. So they all of a sudden, both of them end up getting into a fight. And so Kayla and Maddie are getting into this fight about how, like, Kayla should stick up for herself more because Maddie had gone on to defend her so many times. And Kayla is to go on and say, like, well, but yeah, but I have, like, epilepsy. And so Maddie's like, well, yeah, so what? Like, come on, like, you gotta go on and you gotta be, like, a much stronger person. Because come to find out, Maddie is to go on and not go to the next college that Kayla is going into. And so Kayla is looking at Maddie. It's like, oh, so, like, you're not going with me? And Maddie's like, no, I'm not. So Maddie and Kayla are just having this argument. Maddie storms off. And we all of a sudden, when Kayla is to kind of hear something, she then goes out to realize that Maddie had gotten grabbed by somebody. And so Maddie is telling Kayla, like, hey, get out of here. So she ends up getting grabbed too. So The next thing we end up seeing is that Kayla is to have her eyes open in seemingly this laboratory or doctor's room, and we have them kind of opening up her eyes to kind of check on her eyes to see if that she can use them. And so when Kayla goes right back to sleep, she then is to wake up in this coffin-sized box. So we have Kayla that is to get out of this box after it goes on and is to obviously make this kind of ringing kind of sound. Kayla gets out of this box to then run around yelling for her friend Maddie, and she bumps into two girls, both Alice and Sheena. So we have Kayla that is talking to these three girls, and so like they kind of tell her what's what, and so as they start to kind of make their way into the woods, we all of a sudden see Kayla that collapses, and she's just kind of just frozen. And so like, hey, what's wrong with this girl? So they wait till Kayla kind of unfreezes herself on kind of on like on pauses, and it's like, oh, well, I have epilepsy. And we have Kayla that when she is kind of out of it, she is to go on and see visions of killers. So I thought, I was like, okay, this is rather interesting. Kind of just oddly play this out. And so we had Kayla that was to go on and reach within her coffin to realize that also her medication was gone. And so, yeah, so we have Sheena that is to separate from Alice. So when Sheena is to run off, Alice and Kayla were together, and we had Alice that was explaining to Kayla, it's like, well, maybe this is like pig shooting, and maybe like we're the pigs, where we would go on and have the pigs kind of be shot off, and these dogs would chase after the pigs, and whoever was the slowest pig would normally be the one that would be taken down first. So when Sheena is to run off, and we have Alice and we had Kayla who is to have her episode, we have Alice that is to kind of like set up Kayla to where she's kind of laying on the ground behind this coffin. Alice is to toss this this piece of wood, and that is all because she ends up seeing this slasher character called Rotface. Very unusual name, but that's his name. So Rotface is to come off as this kind of very Jason Voorhees-like character, obviously. And so the girl tosses the rock, Rotface goes to that location, and so Alice is to then run off to the opposite direction. But here's the thing. Rotface goes on and sees Alice running, follows after her, so we then go on to have Rotface that chucks this axe, and it hits into this tree. We go on to have Alice, who makes the mistake of trying to pull out this axe from this tree, and we then go on to have Rotface having all the time in the world to then grab this axe from off the tree, grab Alice, and then peel Alice's face off with this axe and kills her that way. So we have Rotface that hears screaming off in the distance and he heads to that location. So Kayla goes on to wake up. So Kayla then wakes up after her episode, and she tries to go on and get to a certain part of this land that is to be this kind of barrier that has this kind of electrical fence somewhat that is there. And so when Kayla is to try to leave this barrier, she starts to get electrocuted, and so she pushes back to the very edge of this barrier. She all of a sudden is to find a girl named Sally who is running towards her, and Sally is desperately pleading for help. We then find Rotface that is to chuck this axe, landing right into Sally's back, having her completely fall over. And so all of a sudden, we have Rotface who's looking at Kayla and he's like, hey. And Kayla's like, hey. And so this weird moment between the two of them. And then Rotface is to go on and is to try to almost go after Sally. But then all of a sudden we end up seeing a slasher character called Skin Crow. S-K-I-N Crow. Instead of Scarecrow, it's Skin Crow. Very unusual. So, we all of a sudden, instead of having Rotface focus on Sally, he instead is realizing that Skinface is making his way here. So, it all of a sudden becomes a battle between both Rotface and Skin Crow. Funny enough, at some point, I guess, where I was to put in the word Skin Crow, it auto-corrected and said Skin Care. That sounds kind of funny to me. So, we have Kayla that goes on to grab Sally while the two of those slasher guys are fighting, and they run off. So, we have Skin Crow that pushes in the eyes of Rotface and is to slice into this character, assuming he is going to die, but we would be wrong, because he ends up coming back later on in the film. So, Sally is talking nonsense to Kayla. She's mentioning something about, do you believe in magic? God will protect you. And Kayla's just like, what are you talking about, woman? Like, have you lost your mind already? So, we have Kayla that's like, okay, like, I'm gonna go on and, like, I'm gonna have, like, a bunch of, like, branches just shoved in front of this tree, and I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna try to hide you. So that way I can go and call for help somewhere. Which really just means, F off, lady, I'm not gonna drag you anymore. Because that's really what it means. Because by the time that Kayla is to realize what's going on with Sally, it's too late. So, because while Kayla is running off to find help, we have Skin Crow, that goes on to find Sally and drags her off to this tree. And I was like, okay, what is he going to do with the tree? And then we find out. So, Skin Crow goes on and takes Sally's arms from behind her and rips her arms off. And I'm like, oh my god, wow, okay. Like, this is reminding me of, like, the original, or the early, Friday the 13th, when, Jason would go on and use these, tree things to, kill people. And I was like, man, those things were pretty brutal. How Jason would go on and, take a camper in their sleeping bag and just smash them against the tree. It'd be as brutal as that. So I was like, yeah, give me something different, movie. That's great. So Even though, like, I feel bad that Sally had to die, but hey, it's a slasher movie. People have to die. So, sadly enough, R.I.P. Sally, R.I.P. So, why? I don't know. So, we have Kayla that all of a sudden is meeting with another slasher called Pigface. Why? I don't know, but Pigface nonetheless. So, we come to find that while Kayla is kind of facing off against Pigface and is to get the weapon away from Pigface, while Kayla is to go on and do this slashing blow almost, we all of a sudden find out that Pigface's head explodes. His head comes off. And we're like, okay, why? Why is that happening? Come to find out there's a whole reason behind that. So what happens is it seems that all the slasher characters are paired off with all the women. And so when a slasher goes on and is to kill another slasher's woman, we have that head that ends up coming off. What we're basically saying here is whenever a woman is to die, that slasher has to die too. So it's not like we're going to go on and get like an outnumbered game where there's going to be way more slashers than there is going to be women. For some reason, how the end of this movie kind of plays out, or the way that the movie kind of begins with the two slashers and the one girl, I was like, okay, how exactly does that happen? If that's how they're kind of playing it if they're doing the same kind of technique in both of the games, I'm a little bit confused. But anyways, for how the beginning match is, and now this one is, but either way. So we have Kayla that's like, okay, I have a weapon now, I have a machete now, isn't that great? So Kayla goes back for Sally, finding her dead. It's like, well, like, I guess that was bound to happen anyways. So Kayla ends up making her way into this barn, and when Kayla is to be surprised by a woman from her behind, Kayla ends up swinging this machete, hitting this girl and slicing her and killing her. I believe this girl's name is Jackie, because that's the only girl left on the whole cast roster thing on IMDb that didn't have a face, and like I had to just jump to conclusions. So if that wasn't Jackie, my bad, but how many other girls were there left? I had to make that assumption. So Kayla kills Jackie by accident. She's like, oh my god, like I wasn't thinking, I was just ka-slice. So we then have Rose and Sheena that come in and watch Jackie die. And so we couldn't have had Kayla just kind of like stated off of like, oh yeah, there was a killer here, and then he ran off. Like, Kayla could have come up with an excuse, but she didn't. Kayla goes on and tells the truth. She's like, oh, I killed this girl by accident. And they're like, well, like, man, if you go on and if you killed her, like, what's gonna make me not think that you're not gonna kill me next? And Kayla's like, no, it was just so. But the further and further we kind of go with these people, the more they start to put some pieces together in this barn. So we have Kayla, who is to have an episode again, and so she goes down. We have Sheena that takes this machete from Kayla and leaves. So when Kayla is to have this episode, she is to go on and see this Eureka Springs mine, and is to also realize that Matty is to be in this mine, and this killer is to have spotted Matty, but is not going to go on and kill her. He's just going to go on and hide her. It's like, okay, why? So we after this episode is all over and done with, we have Kayla who is to realize where her friend is, and it of course to be at this mine. So we have Rosie kind of, or Rose, the girl that is with Kayla right now, who seems to be kind of this kind of just let's not get into specifics about the character. So Rose is to say that she was to have seen Owly, this slasher that has this owl-like mask, and Rose was to somehow get away from this slasher, and then was to meet up with Shayna, and that's how she got here. So we had Kayla that's like, okay, like, well, so all we need to do is kind of go back to that location and try to figure things out. So we also have Kayla who is to start to realize that if Kayla can go on and every time she has these episodes, she can see feeds of slashers, she's kind of curious how she can go on and do that exactly. So Kayla goes on and pulls out the eye of Jackie because, of course, they were also both of them talking about the time that they were on this operation table and they had their eyes being looked at and one of their eyes was bleeding. So we had Kayla that rips out Jackie's eye to realize that this eye is to not be like the normal eye with these kind of normal things attached to it. It's kind of more wiry and more electrical. And so, like, aha, they put some fake eye into our bodies, every one of us. Like, they all have this camera feed going on in our eyes to know where we're at and to know how to get to us. So the eye is very mechanical. So we come to have Babyface, who is to have this wooden baby face mask. And again, he's to somewhat be like another Jason kind of character, because that's kind of the generic setting we have here. It's either you're Jason or you might be a tweed bit like Freddy Krueger or whichever. But so we have Babyface who is to start to like make his way to this barn, but can't quite see anybody in the barn yet. So he's just kind of like he's just making his way over, but he's just like like I guess I'll be over here, but I don't know like why I'm here. So we have Sheena that finally comes back, and so they're all talking about the operating room and why Sheena is to all of a sudden notice that that Jackie's eye is out, and Kayla explains that, and so excuse me, they're all talking about where they came from before they got to that coffin box. So Sheena is mentioning that she was at a party and then she ended up getting grabbed by thugs. And Rose was stating that she was at home and her mother was kind of homeschooling her. And so after they go on and explain their backstories quickly, but I guess it's still backstories, we then have Skin Crow that comes barging into the barn. So Skin Crow finds Rose. And so Kayla and Sheena are to get their weapons and is to kind of defend and kind of push Skin Crow back outside. And so they realize that the victims and the killers are connected with the whole blowing up the head thing. So they also realized that their coffins were to be labeled Bell 6. Kayla is to realize that her coffin was named Bell 6. So we have the connection that if Kayla is to be the Bell, then we of course have the slasher that she's connected to be the Beast. And so it's a Beauty and the Beast connection. And so we then go on to have Sheena start to realize, like, well, hey, like, if I can go on and kill all these women, that kills all the slasher characters, and then I can take all the time in the world for me to get out of here, because I'll only have to worry about one slasher who is my own. So Sheena is like looking at like these women. It's like, you know what, you girls are looking pretty good right now. Like, how can I go on and kill you all? Because it's gonna be a lot easier to kill the women than it will be to kill the slashers. So she's like, all right, like, I want to kill you guys next. And so both Rose and Kayla run off, and so Kayla has to make Rose understand that we definitely cannot trust Sheena anymore because she wants to kill us off. She's now our enemy. And Rose is like, okay, I understand. So Rose is to state that Sheena is trying to cheat the game. It's like, well, yeah, like, but either way, like, she's trying to she's trying to save her own skin. Literally, in some points. So we have Rose and Kayla that are planning for the mine, and so they both get out of this kind of little shack, and so Kayla is sliding underneath this shack because there's a little hole there, and then so Rose does the same thing, and all of a sudden she ends up getting her leg caught in this kind of wire. So we all of a sudden have Sheena, who's kind of outside, who's seeing Skin Crow, and she's like, aha, like, maybe one of the girls are going to get killed. So we have Kayla that is trying to pull out Rose from out of this location, and then Skin Crow comes into this place where both Rose and Kayla were, and is to see Rose, and then we have a tug of war going between both Skin Crow and Kayla. And so if I were to have been Kayla, like, it was nice knowing you, Rose. Like, I'm sorry that this had to happen to you, but sorry, you may be attractive, but not that attractive. That was horrible. No. No, I would have gone on and I would have helped out Rose. I would have. And I probably would have died because of it. So we go and have Kayla go back in there to face off with Skin Crow. And so we go on to also have Babyface that appears in this whole battle. So let me correct myself. So we had Skinface and we have Kayla who are doing a tug of war Rose. All of a sudden, Babyface shows up and is to try and go on and attack Kayla. Then we go on to have Skin Crow, who pulls Rose back in with him, and so Kayla is to go back into the barn to try and save Rose, leaving Babyface back outside. So, because come to find out, these slashers need to go on and see the character's face to then kill them off. So we have Kayla that is to go on and tell Rose to kind of block her face as much as she can to save herself. So Rose is covering up her face. Skin Crow is trying to pull her hands away from her face. So we have Rose realize that Skin Crow's weapon is kind of on the ground. She grabs it, chops off his fingers on his hand. When Kayla comes back into this place that they were in, we all of a sudden have Skin Crow that is to shove his fingers, or what is to be left of his fingers, into Kayla's mouth, and now it seems that Kayla is drowning in Skin Crow's blood. So Rose goes on uh, to stab into Skin Crow with. He has this kind of weird, like crooked or curved knife. It's weird looking. Uh, it is. So we. After that stabbing is to happen, we have Kayla who is to take a second to just pah all the blood out of her mouth. So Kayla then is to go on and grab this massive like tea device. I have no clue what this is. It's very unusual. But we have this kind of tea thing that is about the size of a baseball bat, but it's like shaped like a T. And in the long part of this T, we have the end of it. It's like this drill bit. So it's like like if you were to have a drill, and like it's just shaped like it's basically for like making a hole. Like how you would go on and you would probably need like, oh, I need to drill a hole into this piece of wood, but the wood is too thick. You would go on and use one of these pieces and start cranking away, and then you could have like a pre-drilled like hole to where you can just easily put the screw in. Why did I go on and explain that? Because I felt that it needed to. So Kayla goes on and drills her way into Skin Crow, killing him off, as I like to say, off that way. So we then go on to have Babyface, who's like, hey guys, what's going on? He kind of pokes his head into this place, and we finally have Kayla, who is up to her just whole body with all of this crap. So we then have Kayla, who is yelling at Babyface, and she's just like, come on then, come on. Like, I'll kill you too. Babyface is like, okay, I don't want to come in here. So he just runs off. So we then have Kayla that bumps into Sheena while kind of Rose is off on her own. So we have the two of them talking, and so they're talking about the number of slashers that are left and the number of women left. And so we have Sheena that's just like, well, hey, if only I have to go on and kill like a certain number of women, then like my game would be a lot easier. And so we obviously have Kayla that's like, well, I don't want to kill you, but like I'm not going to save you either. Because come to find out, we have Rotface that makes his way back. So Rotface goes on and is to take his axe and is to slice right through Sheena's head, splitting her almost through a good portion of her body in two, from head up, which that seems like a very hard thing to accomplish for how thick a skull could be, but I guess that's just me. Look at like Terrifier, where Terrifier would go on and have a guy just kind of taking this chainsaw and chainsawing a woman completely in half, and that of course is with a chainsaw. Could you just imagine like trying to chop a person in half with an axe through the head? That just doesn't really But anyways, the logic of a slasher film. We have to go on and just delay the logic of thinking in a slasher movie. So we have Kayla who's like looking at Rotface, and we have Babyface that is attacking Rose. And so Babyface goes on and is to put this knife into Rose's hand. And when Sheena is to die, Babyface's head explodes. And so now Rose has to pull this knife from out of her hand. So, I believe Rodface is not needing to kill off Shayla here. Or Shayla. Kayla here. Maybe there's a piece of Sheena that fell on Kayla, and now it's Shayla. No, Kayla, my bad. So, we have Rodface that is to kind of pick up his weapon and not go after Kayla. So, Kayla takes the weapon from Rodface and is to kind of drop him down and is to put an axe to his chest, hopefully killing him this time. So, we have both Kayla and Rose who go on to make their way to this tree. That all of a sudden now this tree, out of all the places in this town and location and whatever, this one place of this random tree has a map that is telling them where to go to get to this mine. And I was like, what? Why? That doesn't make any sense, but whatever, story purposes, yada yada yada. So, we go on to have both Kayla and Rose are to try to come up with a plan, but Kayla is to state, it's like, well, hey, like, we can't go on and like state what our plan is, because then the person that is seeing through our eyes will know. We even had at one point where Kayla was talking to Rose, and Kayla was stating to the person on the other end of this eye, it's like, hey, I know what your plan is. And Rose is like, who are you talking to? Kayla's like, the people that put these eyes in us. So, we have Kayla that is to take Rose's hand. And is to take Rose's hand and is to, with her finger, go on and start writing certain things into this girl's hand to say, it's like, okay, you understood what I just like told you, right? And so that's how they go on, and they are to talk to one another. So we then find the Eureka Spring Mine. And so Kayla ends up finding Maddie, and they're hugging, and they're like, oh my god, like, this is crazy. So Rose, now that she is to see both of these two together, she of course is very upset, but from kind of how she was acting before, she is not acting that way now. It seems that this girl, once she is to be upset, it seems that all of a sudden, like, her words seem to form a lot faster than she was before. So was she, like, faking this the whole time? Or was it just, like, the acting of it all? Where it's like, hey man, like, this movie's almost over anyways, so, like, kind of just, like, when you're acting upset, just act normally, I guess. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But maybe also, like, that's the way of which, I don't know, what do I know? So, come to find out, Kayla is to realize that the mine is to have collapsed, and they can't get into the mine to possibly escape from this location. So, we have, again, Kayla, who is to go on and have another one of her episodes. And Sheena was honestly baking on Kayla to have an episode while Sheena was with Kayla. And I was like, Wow, that's pretty horrible. But so we have Kayla, who is to start to have one of these episodes, and we all of a sudden have Owlie that appears, the slasher Owlie. So what Rose does is she goes on and is to slice the neck of Matty while Kayla is having one of her episodes. And so that goes on and blows the head off of Owlie. And so when Kayla wakes up, we have Kayla, who is so upset that she had lost her friend, but Rose is completely fine. We have Rose that goes on to explain it's like, well, yeah, like your friend had died, and like Owlie is now dead, and so we have Kayla who's telling Rose like, I should have let you die. And Rose is like, well, we were friends, like we should have stayed together. And so we have Kayla that's like, go away, like just so Rose runs off, and so what Kayla does is she makes it back to that barrier, that electric fence, and she goes on with this knife to pull out her own eye, and then is able to easily walk past this barrier. She pulls off this kind of green light that this barrier had, so she could continue on to just continue to walk past. And so, considering Rose is the only one left, Rose is to go on and be set up for the next match, as we then go on and see this kind of very shadowy laboratory that is going on and kind of being done for the day. And so this person just kind of walks off. And so we get a little bit of pieces here and there, kind of looking at who is kind of setting up this game. But we don't really see a face or a this or a that the whole entire time. It's just shadows and figures and whatever. So we then go on to have this random guy named Derek, who is having this headset on, and he's watching the playback of one of these kills. Alice was getting killed by Rotface. And all of a sudden this playback is to like stop going, and he's like, fuck! So he takes off the headset, he gets very upset, he is calling the people who are to have this, who he's to have this prescription with, and it's to say, it's like, well, hey, like the playback is very faulty, and so on and so forth. So, but all of a sudden, Derek is to kind of hear like somebody like walking around in his house, and he's like, hello? So we have Derek that states he's like, hey, I'm calling the cops, and the subscription people are like, oh, you are? And Derek is like, no, like, I'm not talking to you. There's somebody in my house. So we have Derek hanging up with this caller, and so Derek is starting to look through his house. Come to find out, Kayla is to surprise Derek, and we have her wearing sunglasses on. So Kayla is talking to Derek and is to a scene that Kayla is to have this taser where he got shocked with. So Kayla is to ask, like, well, hey, where did you get this headset? And we have Derek that admits that it's from some club, and she's like, okay, like, what's the club? Where's the club? When is the club? So we have Kayla that wants a name. And so Derek is like, well, I have money, and she's like, no, I want a name. Like, give me a name. Give me something. So we have Kayla that continues to torture Derek until he gives up a name of Mike Fallon. And so Kayla is to turn to an imaginary friend, it seems, that is to be Matty, because I guess Kayla has lost her frickin' mind. And so Maddie is going on and taking out Kayla's hand and is to use her finger to tell her something. And so Kayla then goes on to take this knife and is to stab into Derek and kill him. And so that's how the movie finishes off. So with that said, I'm going to quickly try to get out of here because I know that this is an hour and 22 minutes and I've already been talking for 50. I apologize, but that's what happens when I go on and rant about things. You can go on and listen to the whole thing, or you can just hear the beginning of it and just like clearly state that I liked this film, and hopefully you can go on and find it yourself. Or have already seen this movie and you're like, yeah, I really like this movie too. It was great. So with that said, bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.